Hey guys, how's it going? This is Mike with another MLS updater. The Philadelphia Union are atop of the Eastern Conference and are flying high at the moment. Goals galore. They've scored more than 3 times as many as they've conceded, and their front three are incredibly dangerous right now. They're very much in the Supporters' Shield conversation, especially with this recent up and down form of LAFC across in the West. We've got 4 more games left of the regular season before going into the playoffs, and I'm here talking with Matt today to discuss a bit more about what we should expect going into those playoffs, what the Philadelphia Union are aiming at, and a bit about their season so far today. Hey, so I'm here with Matt. Matt, how are you doing?
Good. Yeah, doing great. It's good to be here.
Brilliant. Thanks very much for joining me, Matt. Let us know. We're obviously talking about Philadelphia today. Why are you the man to be getting us getting all the information across?
Well, I'm the managing editor of BrotherlyGame.com, website devoted to covering the Philadelphia Union. So uh, you don't want to talk to me about too much else, but definitely the Philadelphia Union's something I know a little bit about anyway.
Fantastic. So it's been one hell of a season for you guys so far. Tell us a bit about what it's like amongst the fans and the atmosphere in the stadium at the moment. What it's like supporting the team that are absolutely flying.
Yeah, it's a little bit surreal right now. Obviously, there were high expectations going into the season. The team has really been consistently good really the last 4 or 5 years. They've kind of gotten better every year. They won the Supporter Shield during COVID, which was just a really difficult year in a lot of ways, and um, you know didn't do so well in the playoffs, but still the expectation. And then obviously it was COVID that sort of railroaded things in the conference final last year, which I think left a yeah, it still leaves a bad taste. Just the way it went down. If they lost in the conference final with their full team, that's fine, but that's not what happened. So
Uh,
I think there were a lot of expectations going in, and now it's just um, really, I think everything that anyone expected has been exceeded to date. And so it's just kind of surreal. It's like, wow, this team that struggled scoring goals last year is now scoring them in insane amounts over the last couple of months. So it's been really, I think it's been really fun. It's been fans are loving life, but also it just feels a little weird that this is the team that has had a history of not struggling to score goals and scoring them so easily. So it's been a wild ride the last couple of months for sure.
but definitely, like you say, like scoring widely. The first 11 games, there's only 16 goals that got in, and all of a sudden we're up over 63 goals.
Yeah.
It's 3 times as many as you've conceded. You obviously mentioned how good you've been defensively throughout the last few years, but it's been goals that haven't been as free flowing. Maybe. And this change you've had up front, obviously Carranza and Ura have come in to form this sort of trio with Gazdag in that offensive side. What have they brought, which maybe you were lacking with the likes of Shabilko and Santos going forward in those previous seasons?
Yeah, it was interesting. When Carranza came in, he was very highly touted, was a big transfer, didn't get to play as much as he should have. And, so there were some concerns about, well, this was just sort of a we'll see what happens kind of thing. But then so even having, there's some concern about, like, if you have Casper and you have Julian, is that enough? And then they obviously brought in Ua, and it's been a little bit slow going, with the processing of his visa and some injuries in the beginning. But I mean, just the two of them together has been really incredible to watch. And I think the big difference, obviously, with Gazdag is having a year under his belt, learning the system a little better, but also having just different types of players in front of him. Casper had an incredible goal scoring record, and he really had zero expectations and he
Yeah.
exceeded those. But and he was, you know, he definitely served the position well. But I think in terms of the system and what they wanted to run, and just the way that the forwards interact with each other, Julian does a lot of stuff off the ball, a lot of defending, a lot of pressure. Uwa does that too, but he also is just really he makes a lot of runs. His pace, his just his ability to see the game is really just taking them to a new level. And I think Santos had a tremendous amount of talent and pace, and he couldn't stay healthy. And I mean, I think aside from a couple suspensions for Carranza, he's really been steady, and Ua, now that he's gotten into form and fitness, is has been really consistent. So I think it's a couple of things. It's just the makeup of so much of this is the interplay between players, right? Who you have around you, who you're pairing with, and I think that they've gotten that right. And they've been fortunate just to keep those players in the lineup day in and day out, and just that they really just feed off each other, as you've seen.
Yeah, definitely. There's been a sort of case for a number of teams have got some of these front threes that work well, like Cincinnati, for example. Good trio of players going forward. And Philadelphia seems to have they've had a structure of how the team's going to be set up for a number of years now. It's not something that's completely out of the ordinary for teams to prepare for. There's a degree of, we understand what their system is, but teams don't seem to know how to particularly cope with it. And adding in players like Uro and having that pace and a bit of physicality seems to make it quite difficult for players. And now he's had that time, like you say, to adapt to being in the league and with the club. And having those young players as well coming through the academy into that team. So there's less, Ura's had that time to prepare and has to get used to it. But many of these other players are just stepping into the squad knowing what they're already meant to be doing before they make their debuts, I guess.
Yeah, and I think an important part of it is that they, you know, generally they haven't added players that anyone's super familiar with. And I know sometimes a fan base in the off season that sees teams adding players of known quantity, players, national team pedigrees, and um, not that these players don't have opportunities with the national team, but just the players that are sort of you see their names in lights. And but I think they've shown is that for every team that adds like a big name player, you add a big name player, you make them fit, right? You go for the name and the talent and history and the pedigree, and you kind of make them fit. Whereas the union has taken this approach of, this is our system. We're going to find players who fit in that system. And in the case of Uwa, they had to spend to get him, but they knew, hey, because of how much they've kind of engineered this, they knew, okay, well, we will spend this money for him because he's that good and he fits our system that well, as opposed to, hey, this really well-known goal scorer is available. Let's go get him and spend like $10 million on him. So I think in that sense, they've really maximized their ability to, and they have, because they've gotten some transfer fees and have a little bit more money to work with within a very tight budget. And they've just really maximized their ability to do that. And I mean, Carranza, again, someone who they saw who would fit in their system, who wasn't really being utilized in the way that, I mean, he just really was not playing.
No.
He was not, and that's where there was some, it's like, was he bad? Like, no, he wasn't playing. So, and you could say, well, maybe he just wasn't training well, and that's why he wasn't playing, which is certainly a possibility. But he also just wasn't being utilized in a way that the union saw that they could utilize him. And I mean, really, from day one, he was, he impressed everybody. I think the staff was just really happy with him from day one in preseason, and he just really kind of he fit in well, and he's fit in well. So, the question now is just like, how long is he going to stay, and how long can they afford to keep him, because of how rapidly his stock is increasing. But yeah, I mean, I think it is to have a system where you're fitting in players as opposed to here. And this is really in the history of the club, and a lot of clubs I think get in trouble because just they're just collecting players and squeezing them in and trying to figure out how to play with them. They have the system in place, and they're pretty pretty strict. I mean, not, obviously they make adjustments, and they find ways to fit players in from time to time, but it's just, you know, they 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 recruit players based on the qualities of the player they want, and that's, I think that's really been the secret to their success, and it's really shown with certainly with Ua and Carranza and
Definitely.
Gajdag as well. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. And that, like you say, they've had their system, and it seems like their staff, when they bring players in, they're like, the players are well aware that you're coming into this. It's not this player's arriving and let's accommodate him completely. And that's all, and that's a different way of doing it. Obviously, and it's made sure that you can be more consistent throughout, especially these last few years. And you mentioned like finances are coming in because those players have managed to get that chance, and sort of like the likes of Brendan Aronson, for example, has gone off to Europe and has continued to improve, and financially it's benefited the union, and that can continue to do so. It's like a lot of the younger players you've got coming in, and some of these big players, obviously Paxton Aronson's coming through, but Jack McGlynn in the midfield has had a really sort of jump out season, taking that centre midfield for his own at the moment, hasn't he?
Yeah, I mean, in some ways, yes. In some ways, no. I mean, he really only has played 600 minutes, and I know that's that difficult thing, right? Where you say, okay, he's done well when he's played, but you also have, what do you do with Flock, Leon Flock, who's a good young player as well, and in some ways they have more options going forward when he's in, as opposed to Flock, who is better defensively. And you saw his ability just to cover the six. You lose really very little when Jose is not able to play, but then when you have Jose and Leon Flock both, you know especially when your forwards are, your front three is scoring as well as they are, do you maybe want to go more of a defensive route and protect the defense with, like you do with a player like Flock, and Flock also opens up opportunities for Wagner to be involved in the attack like he has. So it's a bit of a dilemma, but I mean it's really more about uh it's really more about the team and how they um how they approach opponents than it is McGlynn, because he has really shown that he belongs on the field. It's just a matter of figuring out how, the times that they can use them versus the times that they need just a different lineup in there, which is a little bit of the struggle, right? When you have players from the international market, who come in and play every day, and then you're trying to find ways to bring in those younger players. I mean, Brendan had to beat out, a Mexico international, Marco Fabian, for his spot. So you know, it's good on one hand, but then on another hand, like, they push this narrative that they're built by the academy, when in reality they're not completely built that way. It's more that the academy players provide a lot of really good depth and quality off the bench, and they're sort of fighting to kind of prove themselves to get more playing time.
Yeah, like what you mentioned there, how like changing the centre midfielders, like if you change between Flack and McGlynn, as you mentioned in that, it affects how the rest of the team play, and that sort of fluidity and those minor changes on paper seem to make such a big difference to how the team can attack, and that's got to be something that's just shows how well like Jim Curtin's doing his job at Philadelphia. That just if things aren't working, it's only minor things that need to be amended, and all of a sudden you're attacking a completely different way.
Yeah, and for a team preparing against them, you're not. It's not like you breathe a sigh of relief because there's a couple changes in the lineup. I mean,
Yeah,
even with Bedoya out of the lineup, they were more than okay against Red Bull without Bedoya. So, as good of a season as he's had, you sort of recognize that there just aren't a lot of weak spots that you can exploit. Some people might say, well, compared to Kai Wagner, the right back position isn't as strong. I mean, there's really no outside back as good as Wagner in the MLS right now, So, but even then, you're like, okay, those guys, either Harriel or Bizo, can beat you. So, maybe you like your chances going attacking on the down that side as opposed to Wagner's side, but those both those guys, whoever's in the lineup, is not a pushover, and you don't really gain that much of an advantage over either of them. So it's a problem, a good problem to have for Curtin and his staff making a lineup every week, but it does make it difficult on opponents for sure.
100%. And hope, like, if going into looking ahead to next season, without getting too far ahead of ourselves, if you're going into tournaments like CCL and things like that, having this
Yeah.
depth, being able to rotate players will be sort of vital to ensure that you're able to compete on all levels at the beginning of the MLS season. Obviously, Seattle's struggling after doing so well in CCL, and the effects go on throughout the year. So having that big roster and the players that can come in and having the confidence in them is incredibly important. You touched on Bedoya there. It's such a big part of the team. Obviously, getting on in years. How is the feeling around the club for how to replace him, for not just what he does on the pitch, but what he does for the club as a whole?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to say how, does he have another year or two in him? I mean, the way he's played this year, uh, he's kind of silenced any critics about his age this year, and just yeah, I mean, I think, but you said it. There's definitely players. A Quinn Sullivan might be an heir apparent to him, if he sticks around long enough, but um, it's one thing to say, like, I think they'd be okay without him in the lineup, but also there's so many other things that he does bring a team that, you sort of, first of all, you want him to win an MLS Cup for sure,
Yeah.
to get to before he retires, to be as decorated as he can be, because I think he deserves it. But he does provide so much for the team
Yeah.
in terms of his leadership, and I mean, he really, in my mind, I mean, he's the definition of a captain, and it's where you might be able to replace a player in terms of just their game impact, on the field. It's really a challenge to think about how they replace all the other things he does. Just, I mean, the way that he represents the team, the way he represents, that he sticks up for his teammates, and I mean, just so many things that he does. I think the example that he sets, I mean, it can't be understated how much of an example he sets for younger players, about what it means to be a pro, about what it means to take care of yourself so that you can still be playing when you're well into your 30s like he is. And I think that those are all the things I think that make it a little more of a question mark of who can fill that void, and it can't be filled. Maybe it's more of a committee kind
Yeah.
of thing that but you also see, like, just the leadership that Gazdag has shown. I mean, he isn't just, an MVP candidate because of his stats, although it seems like stats are what really put players in that conversation. But just the way everything about how he's gone about his business is it makes him valuable. Certainly, it's hard to pick a most valuable player for the team, but certainly in terms of a league, I think he has to be up there in that conversation, no doubt.
Yeah, definitely. And it's obviously you're guaranteed playoffs already. Obviously, the way everything's going, and LAFC have sort of hit this little up and down period at the moment. Level on points, I think LAFC have got that extra game in hand. But
Yep.
do you feel that this consistency that the Union is showing will get them over the line in Supporter Shield going into MLS Cup, or is this something that is just, let's prepare ourselves for MLS Cup? Is that what's?
Yeah, I think it's, Supporter Shield's like nice if you can win it, but I think since they have won it already, the attention and the focus is on winning MLS Cup. I mean, yeah, you want, if the product of them, maybe only dropping a few more points in the rest of the season as a trophy, like, obviously they'll take it, and it's a guarantee for CCL, which this is the last year where it kind of feels like you have to really qualify for that, because they're going to open up the competition, and you're going to have teams that finish third place or whatever in CCL, but or however that breaks down. So yeah, I think it's like supporter shield would be nice, and they're certainly not gonna um, want to be in a position where if LAFC does drop more points that they aren't taking advantage of that because that means that they're dropping points too. But I
Mm.
think that the real focus and the real attention is on MLS Cup, particularly if you know. Let's face it, the Supporter Shield teams don't have a great playoff record
Yeah.
in recent years. So the likelihood that LAFC winning the Supporter Shield would mean they also make MLS Cup final is it's not a guarantee. So and I've said this recently too that West Coast playoffs are really harder than East Coast playoffs because of some of the travel that you have to do. Obviously, LAFC being the Western Conference winner would not necessarily have to travel, but there's a lot of components I think to the playoffs that teams can easily slip up and with just one bad game with a single elimination. So yeah, I think them being able to certainly they're gonna it would be a surprise if they don't secure home field through the playoffs up until the conference final, which bodes well because they haven't really lost a whole lot at home.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, I mean, I think the focus really is on getting to that MLS Cup final because they haven't gotten to the final in ever, and they haven't been to a final in quite some time either. So that's really the main focus at this point.
Brilliant. Who going into this, obviously, like the goals have been flowing. Like some say, there's been quite a few against teams like DC United and things like that, but you can only beat who's against you. And
Yep.
the defense has shown that even if you aren't scoring 6 goals, you're still not conceding throughout the seasons. Is there teams that going into the playoffs and looking across to the West, if you make it through to the final, that you think these are the teams that we need to be more wary of, or that's teams that you're more keen to be put up against, should I say, coming through the playoff rounds?
Yeah, I mean, there's teams that I don't know. The teams that I look at are that first round game against whoever wins the 4-5. They can be dangerous just because the Union will most likely have that bye, so they're going to need to figure out, just just really be do what they got to do right to show up for that game and know they're going to have a tough opponent, whoever it is. In terms of the West, I don't think that it really if they make MLS Cup, I think their biggest opponent's gonna be themselves. I mean, I think this team they've had times where they've come out kinda sluggish, and I always say the best way to beat the Union is to actually, finish your chances early because they'll come, and I know that's easier said than done when you have Andre Blake in goal against you, but if you can finish your chances, because you generally are going to get at least one chance in the first 20 minutes. Almost every team does. And if even the game the other night, and if you don't finish that chance, then you put the Union in the position that they want to be in, which is to score first. And they're hard to beat, but they're even harder to beat if they score first. So your best bet is you're looking for an equalizer. If you get that, you're lucky. But yeah, I don't think that there is any because their defense is so good. Their goals can dry up, and they're still going to be a hard team to get past in a playoff or in a final.
So what's your feeling personally now? What come the end of the season? What are you expecting to see? Where are you expecting Philadelphia's name to be?
I mean, I think they're gonna finish second in the supporter shield, maybe even as a tie, because LAFC will finish with more wins. But I think LAFC is gonna lose in the playoffs, and I think they're gonna end up playing somebody else in the MLS Cup final. So I think they'll host it. We'll see how that goes down. But I like their chances probably better than any other year in previous history of the club. So I think there's no reason to not be optimistic about their chances for sure.
Yeah, they're for the neutrals, they're definitely a great team to get behind, like you say, not splashing out and just bringing in random superstars and trying this what they can to fill them in, and have developed so many players well. And there's hope for the best for you guys, and hopefully you can be enjoying the end of the season. I'm sure the celebrations around the city will be incredibly enjoyable should you get the MLS Cup come the end of the season. Thanks again.
Yeah,
Oh,
yeah,
sorry.
and it would be huge. It's a World Cup year, so obviously it's a little earlier. Maybe that would be. I mean, early November is probably better than early December to host the MLS Cup in Philadelphia anyway. But I
Yeah.
think I think just in terms of timing, it would not come at a better time, just because in a couple weeks after that, everyone's going to be gearing up for the start of World Cup, and I just think in terms of they're still building this franchise, and I think in terms of what it would mean to the city and to the community and to the region for them to win it would just, or even just to host it,
Yeah.
I think would be massive. And with World Cup coming up, and then 4 years we'll be hosting some World Cup games at Philly. So I think in terms of just if the stars align and that happens, it'll just be an incredible thing for everybody here in Philadelphia.
Oh, definitely, and yeah, great for the sport within the city as well. Such a lot of good sports teams around the city, so great for the union to be getting all this attention. Thank you, Matt, for joining us again.
Yeah.
If you can just remind everyone, just in case they've forgotten from the beginning of the show, where to find all the latest Philadelphia news.
Yeah, it's brotherlygame.com, and then we're pretty active on Twitter at brotherlygame, and yeah, those are the easiest ways to connect with us.
Brilliant. Thanks very much, and hopefully look forward to hopefully chatting again to you in the near future with some trophies to celebrate.
Yes, absolutely. That'd be awesome.
Brilliant. Thanks very much, Matt.
Thanks.
So there we have it. All the eyes are focused on an MLS Cup victory. It's what the supporters want, and that's what they will be aiming at with the way that Jim Curtin has put together this team. They've got their philosophy, and they look well set up to be competing for that come the end of the season. Thanks very much again for listening. Please hit that subscribe button. Follow me on Mike Rice 1983 on Twitter, and look forward to bringing you more information from around the MLS. Thanks very much, guys. Take care. Bye.